When we were young, we wanted to be epic. We rode on the backs of dragons and dreamt of flying cars. We were taught that power was nothing more than being the strongest guy in the room. But brute strength was not enough. We had to learn grace. We found that staying true to who you are is all that matters. That balance isn't found, it's created. And the ability to reinvent ourselves is the most human trait of all. All this to grow fearless, so that when we got the chance, we could deliver that flying car and once again ride on the backs of dragons.
The short elevated version is PT is he's a detective. The book is set in northern Georgia, and he stumbles across the biggest case of his career. And the biggest problem of that is that he may have killed the prime suspect the night before while he was drunk. And he's not sure if he did or not.
Great setup. And you follow it up nicely. You do a lot with this book. It's many things. As I said, it's a police procedural, but there are a lot of thematic braids that are woven through this. It's about race relations, because it takes place in Mason Falls, Georgia. It's about forgiveness. It's about the history of this place. And it's about the way people behave toward one another, who love one another, and who have other agendas involved. So let's talk a little bit about the police procedural part of it, because I thought that was to me so believable, and I do a lot of police procedural work too. You have no police background, no law enforcement background?
No.
So how did you do your research?
Well, you talk to people. You can talk to cops. You can do a lot of research online, obviously. So you end up doing so much research, as you know, for these books. I'm writing the second book in the series right now, and there's a moment where I don't know everything about how a junkyard works. What happens to the cars, how they come in, what are they worth, how do they scrap the steel, what do they take out before, and all of that basically boils down to one sentence. That's a one-sentence description about that place. So
all the research you did boils down to one sentence.
Yeah, you write in a half a page, and then as you go through it, you cut it down to one sentence.
If you're smart, that's what you do.
Yeah, and you think that was like a day of my life going down that rabbit hole for that one sentence.
P.T. Marsh is such an interesting character. Where did he come from?
So
tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, so PT is someone who, he kind of has these, so we start the story and you kind of get that something horrible has happened before the story to him. And you slowly sort of figure out he's had this personal catastrophe in his family, with his wife and his son. And that was kind of one of the motivations for writing the book, was the question of, what happens when that happens to someone? Like, what do you learn from it? And what happens next, And for him, he learns all the wrong things. He learns the wrong lessons, and that's kind of the fun of following him, is sort of figuring out what he's going to correct, So, one of the lessons he picks up is just that he was making compromises, and we all make compromises, and now he's going to be uncompromising, and it basically turns him into, judge, jury, and executioner potentially. And he sort of wakes up on day 2 of the book realizing that was a really bad mistake, and so he's trying to fix that and potentially cover up a crime and also figure out a crime all at the same time.
Yeah, that lapse in judgment right at the very beginning follows and nags him all the way through the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are terrific adjunct characters as well in this novel. I loved Remy Morgan, his P.T. Marsh's partner in this, who is, well, talk about her, where she came from.
So I think for her, she's a couple things. She's sort of version 2 of PT, so she's the youngest female detective ever in town. She's a woman working in what's largely a man's world, and she knows what she doesn't know, and she's not scared of anyone. And she's kind of like in the book I'm just finishing, the second book. She's kind of my favorite character. She gets a lot bigger as a presence, and just wanted to have like a contemporary female detective who's really smart in the South.
She's really kick-ass, and she's exactly the kind of character you want having your back,
Yeah, and he needs to have someone having his back because he's constantly causing himself trouble. So you sort of wait for like what lengths will she go to cover him.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes a question in their partnership.
There's some interesting and disturbing elements in this book. I'll be honest with you, John. When I read the first, maybe 50 pages, there were a number of scenes that just hit me really hard, really visceral. So I'm going to give away a little something here, but anybody who reads the book, I'm not giving away a lot. The story begins with the discovery of a black teenager who has been murdered. Later we find out in what grotesque ways he was treated before that murder and the lynching. You chose to take readers to that place with Kendrick Webster, the black kid, across the course of about the first half of the book. And those scenes were incredibly disturbing. And I have to be honest with you, I thought, do I want to keep going here? By the end of the book, I think I know why you did that. Could you talk about, you don't have to go into the scene specifically, but talk about your decision to include those and why? Because it was really a risk, I thought.
It's interesting. I never thought not to do that.
Oh, okay.
So.
Are you sick or what?
Because Kendrick gets to tell his story throughout the book, and you slowly pick up more and more of how he got there. And he's definitely an innocent in the book, but I wanted people to get to know who this happened to and why it happened, and it sort of underscores sort of the evil element that's in the book and the great lengths they go to do something to someone so innocent. Sure, so you realize really fast that his dog talks to him.
Purvis is his bulldog.
Purvis is like a 7-8-year-old bulldog, and his dog talks to him sometimes when he's in the room, and sometimes his dog talks to him when he's just driving his truck. So you slowly realize that he's not crazy, or maybe he is. So Purvis is sort of like his conscience and his critic.
Kind of his wiser self talking to him.
Yeah. So Purvis plays a really important character in the book. Purvis is sort of cynical sometimes. He's complimentary sometimes. Usually he's cynical. And the worse sort of PT mentally deteriorates or drinks, the stronger Purvis gets as a character.
Where'd Purvis come from? That conceit.
It was just kind of a fun thing that came about through the writing process. I kind of just invented Purvis along the way, and as PT did something, Purvis said something to him, and then I thought, maybe this will be crazy, maybe someone will tell me to take it out, but no one ever did.
And that was another thing that I really enjoyed about the book, was that sense of place. When you were writing about Mason Falls, when you were writing about the house there on the river, when you were writing about the field where the fire takes, did you have specific places in mind that in your travels you'd somehow held on to and could go back to?
Yeah, I when I'm up there a lot of times, I will literally drive for 6 hours, and I will just drive around.
Do you take pictures while you're doing that?
I don't take a lot of pictures, I dictate. I will drive and just dictate over and over. I will take a bunch, but I'll just stop and just write. So some of the time when I'm up there, when I say, I'm working on the book in Georgia, and I'm actually not working on the book, I'm just working on setting. I'm just like looking at setting, and I'm thinking like, these are like 10 settings that are really important. Like, how do I make them authentic? And then I do have friends in Georgia who read, like read early copies and will tell me stuff. But I think like I've got like a book in my car at home. Like I'm really into like certain. I've got a book like people will see it. It's like Invasive Shrubs of Georgia and Alabama. Like if I'm in a line at the DMV, I'll be like reading that. And so I think like maybe a former life or something.
This book, as I said in the beginning, touches on, or maybe it doesn't, touch on the occult. There is an element that runs through that could certainly be thought of as occult. Although you give some alternate explanations for it at one point. When did you conceive of that really interesting twist?
So I have a book that I wrote before this that I didn't sell, and it was really heavy in that, and so I thought...
Also set in the South, also?
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
exactly. So I brought that, my agent brought that to market, and a famous lady in publishing read it, and they said, oh, this is going to be an auction, and it's going to sell so fast, and they brought it around to a ton of people, and it did not sell at all. So my agent said, you know what, if you're a real writer, write another book.
Yeah.
Great line, right? And she said, we'll sell this one second. So some part of me thought there was so much of the occult in that book that I should put a little bit into here, because that could be like a repeating element that was part of my style.
You're a pretty good writer. You could have chosen to write anything you wanted to, would be my guess, and probably get it published. Why did you choose to write in the genre?
Well, so my history is, so years ago I was working in business and didn't like it, went back to the U of A, said, studied creative writing, one of my peeps out here in the audience. Moved from Arizona to LA, and myself, my writing partner, worked on screenplays, and we were trying to write screenplays for years. Didn't know anyone in Hollywood. Got really frustrating. We were writing really broad comedies, so it's very very different than this, and just kind of got a little burnt out and took a full stop. And after I did that, you kind of start reading. You know, if you love to read, you just go back to your roots and start reading everything. And I think I had a couple vacations where my sister Carrie just gave me a couple mysteries she was reading. And I was not one of those people who said, like, I grew up reading Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys. I always hear that from people. I did not grow up reading mysteries at all. So I read these and kind of loved them. And I love the structure.
Do you recall when they were?
Yeah, I remember 3 books. So one was a Nelson DeMille book.
Okay.
I think it was Nightfall. I'm not really sure. I think that was the name of it. There was a Sue Grafton book. I can't tell you the letter. It was a Sue Grafton book. And the other one's a Michael Connelly book.
Okay.
So read 3 of those and just loved them, and said, okay, I'm going to try this. So joined a workshop. I took a class through UCLA Extension and with an author, and then got into a workshop. So, I'm like, what do they call that, like a 15-year overnight sensation? I've been in that workshop for like 12 years, just like pounding away. We bring 10 pages every Saturday, and along the way you just kind of improve each other's work, and at some point you go a couple of years and you just throw the book out, and then you start a new book, and that's been my process. So it's been a while.
Who have you been workshopping with?
So Glenn Eric Hamilton is in my workshop.
Okay.
Who's
been here, right?
I think he's...
It was actually here on Saturday.
Oh,
okay.
There we go. So, when Glenn got a book deal, we all kind of raised our eyes and said, oh, we can get book deals? Like, we were bringing pages. We were bringing pages and pages, and it, like, made it real, and it kind of motivated everyone in class. So yeah, Glenn got a deal, and then I got a deal, and then somebody else has got an agent now, and they're looking to try to sell something.
You worked in the ad business. Do you still work in the ad business?
I still do work in the ad business.
So you do a lot. Words are important to you.
Yes.
Have you always been a writer?
Yep. Yeah, I've always been a writer, but there's always been like other things that I felt like, oh, I should do this instead. But maybe that was my parents, maybe that was some other people, other influences. I always loved what I did, whatever I was doing, and I still work in the ad business. I love working in the ad business, and I love writing. So we do a lot of, we myself and other writers on my team, we write every day, and sometimes you get to write something that's poetic for a brand. Other times you're selling hard, Other times it's like 2 tickets for $99. Buy now, there's times like in TV and anthems that you write something really beautiful, and those are great moments. There's great writers in advertising.
Many of you who come here regularly know that I have like a 50-page rule, right? If it just isn't working for me, I don't go any farther. Now, in this case, I have to tell you truly, I read 50 pages and it really just didn't light me up. Now, I would have continued because John was coming here and I would be talking to him, and our rule is that we read the book and talk to the author. But because Kent had agreed to come down, I could put this book aside and leave it to Kent. What I've learned from Kent and from listening tonight is that I should have read further in the book than I did. So my rule about stopping at 50 pages isn't 100% a guarantee. In our case, it's a question of expediency. Now, what was it that made me stop? And it really wasn't the voice. It was that I had read some of the things that you start your book with too often. I had read about lynching. I had read about people whose lives were broken and whose families, and alcohol and so forth. And I thought there just wasn't enough original there to make me want to continue if I didn't have to, which is where Kent came in. And Kent has informed me that he read all the way to the end, and those things that stop me actually are resolved or go on and become very differently. When I read the New York Times book review on Sunday, it made me go, maybe I should have read further. and then when I listened to Kent at dinner, it made me also realize that. So I say that to you, I'm a professional reader, right? That's what I'm here for. That it's important for you all to think about why you read books. Why do you want to spend time with this book? Why do you want to spend time with this author? So, this has really been a teaching moment for me.